All right, we are in our experiential exercise for framework 1, and it's our most basic experiential exercise. We're assuming that maybe the students are uninitiated in activated asana, so we want to make sure that they understand these 3 basic activations. So we're keeping it very simple. We're going to start with Tadasana, and this is for our foot to core activation. Now this activation is activating the great toe, arch of the foot, through the knees, through the hips, and into the pelvis, into the core of the body. That's why we call it foot to core. It's our full foot to core connection. Now we do this by applying a certain kind of activation, which employs the lateral or external hip rotators around the hips. These are deep muscles right around the hip capsule. And we're going to try a little experiment where we turn on those muscles and we see what happens to the leg. Okay, so you guys, we're going to have the right foot forward. And if we activate our external hip rotators, this is what's going to happen. When we tighten those muscles, when we contract those muscles, we get the leg to externally rotate. But if we have our foot on the ground, that's not going to happen. What's going to happen is right from the great toe, through the arch of the foot, through the knee joint, through the hip, into the pelvis, we're going to get activation. So let's try that, you guys. So great toes are pointing straight ahead. Heels are a little bit wider, or they might be in line with the great toe, depending on your foot shape. Feet can be together, or they can be a little bit apart. I'll just let you know that if your default position is kind of feet turned out, you're going to want to change that over time if possible, but you'll probably be more comfortable with feet a little wider apart. So you can experiment with that as well. These are all experiments. Please feel free to play around with it, okay? So great toes point straight ahead, heels might be a little wider. We unlock the knees. Now when we activate our external hip rotators, what's going to happen is it's going to come all the way from the foot, where we've grounded the feet. It's going to lift the arch. It's going to have our knees feel like they're turning outward. That's activating the thighs. It activates the seat. And you'll notice something else in a moment. So what we've activated is our lateral and our spiral fascial lines when we do that. You don't really have to talk about the fascial lines right now, but you do want your students to understand this is a foot through to the core, into pelvis, into the core of the body connection, okay? So let's turn that off and on a few times. So I would always have my students play around with this. So guys, you're going to play around. Great toes are grounded. That's so important. A lot of people lift their great toe, that side of their foot. So really watch for that. Great toes stay grounded. And then let's make sure our knees are unlocked. Keep them unlocked and then turn on the activation. Let your students feel where they feel that, okay? They want to maybe even close their eyes, and then we'll try turning it off. Let's turn it on, and then we'll turn it off. Turn it on, and then we'll turn it off. Now, you don't have to keep your knees bent when you turn it on, but it might give you a stronger experience. So again, because we're experimenting, it's fine to do that. Okay, now let's turn it on, and just notice that great toes, sides of the legs, it feels like, into the outside of your hips, into the pelvis. I want you to notice another thing now. Can you feel the inseams of your legs? Does it make it feel as though the inseams of your legs are more active? And when you say pelvic floor, lower belly, does that feel connected to the feet? So let's try going off and on again. So go off. When you stay off, no activation, can you activate your inseams? How would you even do that? Can you try that? Okay, I've tried this a million times. How about you guys? Anything turn on? Probably not. Okay, let's do our regular activation. This is like we're dialing the feet and knees away from each other. You see how your inseams turned on? And it helps you neutralize the pelvis. So this is a really great way to create a neutral pelvis and create a nice strong connection from foot to core that stabilizes your knees. So now we have a strategy for stabilizing the knee, for stabilizing the hips, for keeping the arch of the foot lifted and the foot active. Okay, so let's prove that we can still move if we use this activation. Okay, guys, so we're going to have same setup, feet straight, dial it out, keep the knees unlocked, and then we'll do a few chair pose oscillations. So we'll go down, chair pose, and we'll come up. And we're going to keep dialing the feet and knees away from each other while we do that. So you can feel like, okay, I can move and I can still keep this activation on. That's going to be very useful in transitional poses. So now let's go down into chair pose. And we'll just hold our activation. Great, toes straight ahead, heels a little wider. Probably, if you're teaching lots of classes, you're going to notice a lot of people hug their knees together in chair pose. That's really a collapsed position. Some people turn their feet out in chair pose and put their knees together. Really collapsed position. It's very disrespectful to the joint structure. So if we can teach the people in our classes to keep their feet parallel and dial their knees away from each other in a squat position, however low or high it is, they're going to just keep their knee in a better position. It's a better position because it's a more efficient, optimal joint position, and it gives them access to these fascial lines, which create stability and strength. Okay, so there's lots of payoffs here. So that is our foot-to-core connection. Now we're going to see about the hand-to-core connection. So this is where we'll get down on our mats. Okay, and we'll just look at what would happen in my arms, the limbs, into the shoulder, if I use the muscles, the same muscles that I'm going to use to activate my arm lines, okay? We're going to activate our arm lines the same way that we activate our hips, okay? And that is with external rotation. This is this direction, okay? So if I use the muscles that create that, this is what happens when my hands are in the air. This is open chain. This is going to happen, okay? So I can feel the muscles down here are active, okay, when I dial it out. So I'll just quickly remind you that up here, we dialed it out on our feet. Down here, we're dialing it out with our hands now. What happens if we dial in? This is what happens. And this is something you see probably in students all the time, where they're using their neck muscles instead of their scapular muscles. The scapular muscles are the shoulder stabilizers. So those are the muscles we want to use. So if we take this action, external rotation, we put our hands on the mat, we're going to get activation rather than a movement, okay? We don't get a movement, we just get an activation. So I always recommend great hands spread wide apart, finger pads pressing down, all of them, and then we're activating right from the pads of the fingers, across the wrist, across the elbow, into the shoulder, across the scapula, and onto the spine, okay? That's right from fingertip to fingertip across the back body. So let's go off, just turn it off, and you'll see how easy it would be to sort of be in a more collapsed position for table pose. I'll give you a side view of that. This collapsed position. When you activate, you can't collapse like that. Or you guys can try. Let's see if you can. Dial it out. Oh, okay, that just feels miserable. So generally when you dial out, you're going to have access to a different set of muscles, and you'll be able to get your shoulders nicely supported. Feels a lot stronger. Right, guys? Yes. Okay. Good. So that's our hand-to-core connection. When you're doing something like table, this is going to keep you nice and steady. When you're doing something like little Cobra, we'll do that next. Let's just move our knees back, and then we'll bring the belly down. Okay? So we're going to have our hands beside the chest. Fingers again spread open wide, rooting down into the pads of the fingers. And then we energize like we're dialing the hands away from each other. That automatically brings the elbows in toward the body. So let's look at what happens if we go the other direction. So we dial it out, dial the hands inward, our elbows go outward. If we dial the hands outward, our elbows go inward. Okay, and then we can practice a little Cobra. So let's just go up and down a few times, you guys. Dialing the hands away from each other and just feeling what is happening in the shoulder girdle. If this is a new position for you, it's probably going to feel kind of challenging at first because it's a new pattern. But you'll get it because your body will prefer it because it feels more stable. Okay, let's come up with a little Cobra that we hold. We'll dial the hands away from each other. You can press into the tops of your feet, your pubic bone, reach up with your heart. And let's bring it down. Let's see if we can keep dialing the hands away from each other as we press up and back and just walk your hands back then. Okay, so it's a big difference between, always sinking into the shoulder girdle. This is going to use the muscles that actually meant to stabilize the scapula and the shoulder, and that's going to create stability. So that's our hand to core and a couple of examples. Now we'll look at body is one piece. We're going to start this one again on our feet. So let's come back up and we'll go back into Tadasana, again, where we have our feet parallel, great toe straight ahead, heels a little wider. Knees are unlocked, always, always, always. And then we'll just explore some leans. So for this one, I'm going to just recommend everyone have their arms by their sides. And once you turn on your activation, great toes are pressing down, knees dial away from each other. Now feel inseams of outseams of your legs and then inseams of your legs. Neutral pelvis, keep lifting up through the heart and the crown of your head. Close your eyes. And then we're going to do some leans. So what we're trying to reach for here is this experience of the body being connected from head to foot. Okay, so let's lean forward. You can have eyes closed if you like. I do recommend it actually, you feel more. And then we'll come back to center. And now without knocking yourself over, lean back. And then come back to center, lean to, let's go to the left. And come back. And we'll lean right. And come back. So I would recommend you work with your students a little bit until they realize that, yeah, if I lean to one side, my whole body has to respond to that. If I lean forward, my whole body has to respond to that. So you see how the body has to operate as one piece. You could also do a little exercise where you don't use the activation and have them leaning forward, back, side to side, and they'll find it really hard to stabilize, and then do it with the activation turned on, and you'll probably find that it's much easier to keep, not fall over, basically. Okay, so try some leans with your students, and then we'll do a moon pose variation. Okay, so you guys have your chosen positions for moon pose. So we'll just bring the arms up. So we still use the same foot to core activation here. I'm going to just give you some variety with the hands, okay? So anytime you bring the hands together and either steeple or weave the fingers or turn the palms inside out, you have an opportunity to bring the arm lines into your posture by pulling the fingers apart. So if you do that, you're going to notice that, again, it's those same scapular muscles that are turning on. Okay, so we've got Susie doing hands on head, pulling the fingers apart. Peter steepling, pulling the fingers apart. Jess is using one arm. So for her, she's not going to be able to pull on anything, but she's still going to use an external rotation position with her shoulder because it's just going to feel better. Okay, so you guys, we're going to go to the right side first. I'm going to pull my fingers apart. We have our activation turned on, and we're pressing over to the side. So we want to feel into our left foot here, push down into left foot, push through heel of left hand. And you cannot escape the sensation of, the body being one piece, especially on that left side of the body. Keep pulling the fingers apart so you can really feel your hand to core connection, foot to core connection, body is one piece connection through the core of the body. Let's come up to center. And we'll exhale over to the other side. Now we're going to want to push down into right foot. Remember, your feet and knees are still dialing away from each other. And your hands are pulling apart from each other if you're using a hand bind. Okay, one more thing I want to mention here is the breath. So if you don't feel like you are taking nice full breaths, then make sure you're cueing your students. If you're not hearing them breathe, I would cue them to breathe. Let's come up and bring the arms down. Now, let's just for a moment feel the difference between the activation and letting go of the activation, okay? And just notice what, your students automatically do, because sometimes people are like, oh, okay, I'm not activated. So this is what I'm going to do. So let's try moon pose in whatever sort of lazy position you fall into. So let's do it just the same. But if we take it over to the right side, you can feel like it doesn't feel like the body is one piece in the same way. Let's come up, ground into your feet, dial the feet and knees away from each other. All right, use your inseams, pelvic floor, lower belly, lift your heart, lift your crown. Now go over to the right side. Feels like a different body now. Okay, so I do recommend that you get your students to try it both ways. Let's come up. Let's go into more of a lazy. Many people kind of spill the pelvis or the anterior, do an anterior pelvic tilt in a posture like this. So this is going to help them keep the pelvis neutral. Okay, so if they're kind of being lazy and then going over to the side, the other thing is a lot of students think that the goal is to get as far into the bend and they sort of do some crazy things in their body to make that happen. So let's go back, activate, get tall, inseams and out seams, pelvic floor, lower belly, lift the heart, lift the crown. Now let's take a little bend and push into right foot through heel of right hand. Pull your fingers apart, breathe, and you can feel, yeah, there's a really strong experience of the body being one piece. All right, let's bring it up. Arms can come down. We'll shake it out. And we'll do one more little experiential exercise on the floor in plank. Okay, so whether or not your students can do a full plank, doesn't really matter. We'll start with plank from the knees, okay? So great to press into your fingers, pads of the fingers, dial your hands away from each other, press into the tops of your feet here, and then shift your body forward. If you can straighten your hips, but you have to take your hands forward, you can go ahead and make that little change. Okay, so dial your hands away from each other. We're not coming to the mat, we're just going to stay right here. But we want to have an experience of the body being one piece. So press into the pads of your fingers, dial your hands away from each other. Feel your shoulders. Press into the tops of your feet enough so that you can feel a response in your belly. Hold it right there. Now, if your students are able and they want to try it, they can step into the toes, grounding into the great toes. Once you've done that, you can actually dial the feet and knees away from each other slightly. Holding. Body is one piece here. Feel a kind of confluence of energy behind the navel in front of the spine. Let's just take one more big breath. And we're going to bring our knees down. And you can take your hips back and take a little break there, you guys. Feel free to come up. So any other little practices you want to think of so that your students get a chance to turn things off and on again, to feel what it's like without the activation, then try it with the activation. So you really want your students to kind of experience it in their body and be able to sort of prove it to themselves. So that's where questions may come up, but that's the perfect time for it because it's just an experience, it's experimental, and then after that they can do a practice and try these things out. But it's good to give them a chance to try with you under your direction and try some experiments. Okay, so give it a try. Let me know how it goes, and I will see you on the next framework. Bye for now, you guys.